We are Matt and Diana. After spending 2 years full-timing in our RV over on the west coast, we are heading east. Today is day 3 of our 2,800-mile journey across America, and as we drive, we share how we plan our travels.
We missed a lot of beautiful places along the way, but don't worry, we will be back someday. This time, we want to make sure we get to the East Coast in time to see the full colours in northern New England. Last night we stayed at the Cabela's in Rapid City, South Dakota, and it was basic, but it worked out pretty well. The spaces were pretty narrow. We were fairly impressed. There was some big Class A motorhomes in some of the spaces, and they weren't super level, so we did actually have to disconnect the trailer and raise that. It was going to pull the tongue up too much for me to be happy with the truck being raised that high. But otherwise, it was fine.
It was pretty quiet.
Definitely quiet in the warm-up.
Yeah.
And it was just off the road. It was really convenient. So this morning we hit the road again. It is now 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We've done a little over 300 miles today. So we've done well over 1,000 miles. And in fact, by the time we arrive tonight, we'll be about halfway through this journey in terms of the miles. So big milestone, literally, I guess. So that's cool. And we've only got about 40 miles left to go today. It's a slightly shorter day than the last two. And we're staying at somewhere new again tonight, aren't we?
Yeah. Tonight we're staying at Harvest Hosts, and for the first time ever, we just signed up today. So let me walk you through how we do the planning for these kind of trips and how Harvest Hosts came about for this particular night. So we usually start ahead of time in MyMaps. So this is Google MyMaps, where you can add pins to different locations and add directions. So first we start, the beginning and the end, and we kind of split it out by how many miles we want to drive for the day. Our first stop is Campendium. We can dry camp, so we first look at dry camping locations along the way. Then we see what is available and roughly space out our nights so that we have some options of where we could stay. We take into account, we'll drive through Chicago, so we're allowing ourselves extra time in case there is traffic. And we made only one reservation, which is the last night, because when we want to arrive in New York, we want to be able to quarantine for 2 weeks. So we made a reservation at the RV park so that we can dump, fill water, do batch cooking, and kind of be ready for a 2-week stint with not going anywhere for anything.
And that KOA is in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
So literally we get to New York, we'll fill up with gas, just as much as anything, just so we've got a receipt showing when we enter the state. Then we'll get to our friend's house and quarantine there for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So 0 interaction other than the gas station in New York for 2 weeks.
So that's the only reservation we made. And for the rest of the nights, we had, certain options that we found on Campendium, like Walmart's, Cabela's,
rest stops,
and so on.
And a rest stop was the plan for tonight.
Yeah. And some other will be staying at some other friends' parking lots or driveways. Rest stop was the thought for tonight. But then we have heard so many good things about Harvest Hosts. So Harvest Hosts is a program where you pay a yearly membership and you can stay overnight, like one night only, at different places that are part of the program, which are wineries, breweries, museums, attractions, farms, and so on. And we thought, around the West Coast, we normally like to boondock anyways, and for, maybe more than one night at a time.
Usually like a week or two.
Yeah, a week or two. But for this trip, we're making miles and we are staying just one night at each place. So we thought Harvest Host would be perfect.
Well, and also the last 2 nights we've been staying in parking lots. So we haven't been putting the stabilizers down. We haven't been putting the slides out, just because we don't want to kind of intrude in their space more than we already are. So we've been trying to be as kind of non-invasive as possible.
Yeah.
But it really would be nice just to be able to put the slide out, have a little bit more space, be able to put the stabilizers down to steady the trailer, So Harvest Host, not only do we get a nice experience at the venue that we're going to, but we also, just the trail will be a bit more comfortable as well.
You do have to arrive during the business hours, so we wouldn't be able to do that on our longest travel days, but on a day like this and tomorrow it will work.
And the idea of Harvest Host is that you don't pay to camp at these places overnight, but they expect you to go in, spend some money at the establishment. So the place we're staying at tonight is a winery, so I think it's a perfectly reasonable expectation that we can buy a bottle of wine for a friend that we're going to stay within a couple of nights, and maybe also do a wine tasting and things as well, which I think after 3 long days in the car, I think we deserve.
So first I add things in MyMaps. I usually like to add multiple options for places where to stay, in case, it's full or it's busy or, something doesn't work out.
And that's what happened to us the first night. We weren't planning to stay at a Walmart the first night.
It's true.
We were planning to stay at a rest stop.
Yeah.
And looking at the satellite view, it was clear this rest area was pretty small.
Yeah.
It had maybe 10 spaces or
Yeah.
so. So we made sure that we had a backup option, the Walmart. And we even phoned ahead and we spoke to the Walmart long before we got to the rest stop.
Yeah.
But we stopped for gas opposite the rest stop and we drove round and it was full.
Yeah.
Didn't matter, we had a plan B, the Walmart, just one more exit down the road. And so yeah, if ever we're concerned that we may not be guaranteed a spot, we always have that backup plan.
Yeah. So first in MyMaps we figure out how many days is the trip gonna take. Then once we know just 8 days, then we put that in the calendar of when we're leaving and when we want to arrive. Then if we need to book anything, then we book that. Then when we are actually driving on the phone, in Google Maps you can open the MyMap and it will show all the pins. So then we can use that to navigate to each place. Another way, so I do most of the, navigation. Matt does most of the driving. Along the way, we often need to stop for, gas, for like rest areas to have lunch at. So I will look those up, and then in the Google Map, I will mark them, add them to the want to go list, and then Matt uses his phone to actually navigate using Google Maps to navigate those places, and then I can find it easily on his phone by just looking for the next green flag that's kind of along the way.
So before we set out on each leg of the journey, I'll find that next stop, whether it's a rest area or a gas station or the final destination for the day, and just put that in my phone. And then we have Apple CarPlay set up on the truck. That's something that we added into our F-150. If you want to see how we did that, then check out the blog post. We'll put a link in the description below. And that then shows us a map view, actually a satellite view on the main screen in the truck. And that's kind of then my navigation for the driving.
We use GasBuddy to find cheaper gas. If Costco is available or nearby, then we'll go to Costco for gas.
That's typically the cheapest, yeah.
That's typically the cheapest.
And to be clear, our truck is a gas truck and not a diesel. So it's a little bit easier for us. We don't have to worry about finding somewhere that sells diesel. We're pretty much guaranteed to be okay. And also, being a smaller rig, we don't have any concerns around height of the rig or length of the rig. Realistically, I don't think we've ever had a gas station or similar that we had a problem with. But if that is something that applies to you, then you may have that consideration. There are, I know, RV kind of navigation tools out there that you can use.
Yeah.
Honestly, we just use Google Maps, and once or twice it sent us down a road that maybe wouldn't have been ideal, but that wasn't really to do with having the trailer. It's just it sent us down a slightly shorter, through town, twistier route to maybe cut off a corner. Mm-hmm. That would have been probably not ideal even without the trailer. So we just tend to just follow Google.
And sometimes I will look ahead on the satellite view to make sure it all looks good, but for this trip it doesn't really apply because we're mostly driving on the highway.
Yeah.
When we are looking for campsites, Campendium, we look at the information for the cell signal for different carriers. Now for driving along the highway, we don't really worry about it because most of the time there is cell signal and it comes in and out. Otherwise, another app that I use is OpenSignal. Then Right now, the weather has been pretty good. If the weather is not so good, we have other apps that we look at for the weather. One in particular is StormRadar. There we can look ahead of time to see whether any kind of storms coming up along the route.
And typically as well on my iPhone, I'll actually add the main cities that we're going to be going through to the weather app, so that I can quickly open the weather app and just see that forecast looking ahead. And I'll just check on that every day or two and just make sure there's nothing creeping up on us unexpected. Like you said, we might get a few storms, smaller storms, I guess, over in Indiana it looks like, but other than that, we've had nothing but blue skies the entire time so far.
So I said that the Google Maps has these lists. You can mark things with the green flag of places you want to go. So I use that in planning of, what are the kind of places that I found that we are going next. Also, I add kind of like bookmarks there, like people recommend places. I'll add those there. After we have been to a place, then I store them so that if we come to the area again, then I know that we've been to those places and they're totally fine. For example, like we still do mark like gas stations. Most of the gas stations are fine. If it's like a really, place that doesn't really work out or it's not really suitable for our RV, then we might I have another list. I might mark it as like no-go, like don't go there again. If I add alternatives, like this is the main option, I'll put the green flag. And if it's another place that's in that area that's just an alternative, I will put it in the alternative list. Over time, you get this big map with lots of yellow stars, and it's really nice. And
then the last thing to talk about is timing on all of these things. So we mentioned before that for fuel economy, we tend to tow at 55 miles per hour. That means that when we're doing a long day, a 500 mile plus day, for example, that is a long day with many, many hours of driving. And we want to make sure that we're safe and we're alert and we're comfortable the entire time. So the way that I kind of plan this out is I look at the number of miles we need to cover that day, and I just divide by 50. So if I know, for example, that we need to do 300 miles, that'll tell me 6 hours is roughly the amount of driving time it's going to take us, assuming that we're doing mainly interstate driving most of the way. That gets us a bit of an extra buffer for fuel stops and things like that. And I then typically add on an hour or two on top of that. So a 300 mile day, we might say, would take us 7 to 8 hours. During that drive, we'll then try and stop roughly every hour and a half or so. And the way it tends to work out is that we'll do a gas stop every kind of 200 miles maybe, so every like 4 hours. And typically an intermediary stop at a rest area or something halfway between those two. Now in reality, you're not going to find gas stations perfectly every 200 miles and a rest area exactly halfway between. Plus, as Diana talked about with GasBuddy, we try and choose the gas stations that have the cheaper fuel. So we then try and work these different things in, see how we're feeling. Don't be afraid to take breaks more quickly if necessary. If we're getting hungry, we'll take an earlier lunch if we're making good progress. Maybe we'll push lunch back a bit. But generally speaking, that kind of cadence works really, really well for us. And the timings seem to work out pretty accurate as well. On a long trip like this, planning can make it the difference between something that's really grueling and painful and a comfortable, safe trip. We always try and put the time in to do that planning because we feel it just makes life much easier when you're on the road.
Way less stressful.
So much less stressful. So I hope these tips have given you some ideas as well. And let us know in the comments below if you've got some tips for us on how you plan your long travel journeys as well.
And we'll see how our first Harvest Host experience goes.
I will say I am looking forward to that wine tasting now. We've arrived at this incredible Harvest Host location. This is a winery, and so we're off to do the only thing that makes sense, do some wine tasting.
Do you feel fancy?
No, it's very pleasant.
We have made it to New Lisbon, Wisconsin, and tonight we're staying at another Harvest Host location, which also is a winery.
Drivers like to do stupid things in the city. They see trailers and they think, I must pass that obstacle. I must do anything I can to cut them up and go around them. So you have to be very alert. Last night we stayed at another Harvest Host venue, this time another winery. Our second venue, second winery, and another great time. The winery this time was closed, but we'd phoned ahead in advance, and even though the winery was closed, the owner was still allowing people to stay in their RVs in the parking lot out front, and we asked to stay there, and he said yes. It was quiet, there was not really anything going on there. We did have some neighbours, another RV pulled in later, but honestly, we were still parked there right next to the vineyard, and it was just really beautiful. We had a fairly quiet night. I went to bed pretty early because this morning we woke up super early and we were back on the road by 6:15 a.m. The reason? Today we had to cover 350 miles, and about halfway through that journey we would be circumnavigating Chicago. So even though we weren't going to be on the downtown streets, we would still be going through a pretty busy urban area. So we were keen to have that happen kind of late morning time, and the timing worked out perfectly. We finally made it to our destination here in Elkhart, Indiana at about 3 o'clock this afternoon, even factoring in the time zone change to make it here. The times moved forward 1 hour, and we are now on Eastern time. That is our last time zone change of this trip. Tonight, we're staying here at the parking lot at Dometic here in Elkhart, Indiana, and we're going to be meeting a few people from the Dometic team tomorrow morning before we hit the road again and continue our journey east, this time heading to Cleveland, Ohio.
Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe to see more of our adventures. In the next video, we'll be tackling an unexpected stop along the way.
Can you catch that fly?
There's no fly. Okay, clap.
I caught the fly.